My name's Melissa Avera, and I love being a realtor. I specialize in real estate in the DFW and surrounding areas, and I also grew up here, so I'm very familiar with the Metroplex. Buying or selling a home can be an extremely stressful task, so I really try to go the extra mile to take that stress out of my clients' hands.
This is Going the Extra Mile. Now, from Frito Nation Productions in the Caddo Office Reimagined Studios, here's Melissa.
Hey everybody, Melissa Avera here. I'm really fired up to be in the studio today. This has been a very long time in the making. I have a good friend here. His name is Phil. He is a friend, he's a trusted advisor, and he is my attorney. So I'm very grateful to have you here. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're swamped, so let's just get after it and crush it.
Sounds good.
So just to kind of get things started, I'm always curious just to know, what made you decide law was the career for you? Is this like a family thing or something you've always known you wanted to do?
God's honest truth is no. One day I woke up and I was complaining about my job, and my wife said, you got two options: quit your job and go to grad school, or shut up and go back to work. And I ended up quitting and going to law school. So.
Nice. And here you are. You know, I mean, I have to share. So I don't even remember how many years ago it was that I met you, but it was way, way before I was even in the real estate industry. And I met you at a networking event. And it was a small group of people, and everybody exchanged cards. And I mean, you know, I went to one or two, and then a lot of the networking stuff is just not my jam. So I kind of stopped going. And then once I got into real estate, I'm like, okay, I need an attorney. I need somebody I can trust and all this. And I remembered you immediately. And I started digging through my drawer, and I was like, lo and behold, it's probably been like close to a decade, I felt like.
I don't think it was that long, but probably a couple of years, probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, a long time. And I found your card and I reached out, and it was just like without skipping a beat, you know, and you just made such an impression on me from the first time I ever met you. I mean, I know a lot of attorneys, and I feel like most of them just aren't honest. They're just not real. And you were like the most real human who was just so transparent. And that's how I am. So it's like, I want somebody to shoot me straight no matter what. And I just really value that quality in you. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's always been my goal. I mean, it's, you know, brand of my law firm is bluejeanslaw.com, because it's, you know, really my philosophy on life is just, you know, we want to treat people right. You know, so much of the law nowadays is attorneys in 3-piece suits and 70-story office buildings, and you know, they've got to charge their clients to maintain that rent and everything else, and it's kind of a broken system that you know, through the years, you know, you're starting to see change. I think COVID has made a big change to it, where a lot more people are working from home, and it brings the prices down, and it gives us the opportunity to actually provide better quality legal services to people, because you know, we're not trying to carry or pay for that massive overhead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I recorded a podcast a month or two ago that we're calling kind of Getting Your Financial House in Order. And there's a lot of components to it. But one thing that, I mean, I deal with all the time in my business, and so do you, it's what you do, is, you know, people having their affairs in order. Having, you know, let's be real, nobody wants to talk about death and dying and preparing. I mean, it's morbid, right? But I think people are missing the boat by not getting their stuff in order. I mean, when someone, I want you to talk about like what happens when, just so the general public knows, because most people don't know how important this stuff is. Like, what happens if you die without a will or trust or something in place?
The first question always becomes is, you know, what's the family situation, right? So if you are married and all of your kids are of that same marital relationship, then everything tends to pass where you want it to. It does involve going to court a lot of times, and just depending on what county it is and the procedures we have to go through, you know, it can be expensive, but it just really kind of depends on what that family situation is. The biggest issues we run into are now with the blended families, where it's a second marriage and they've got kids from that first marriage. At that point in time, if one of the spouses passes away and they had a child from another relationship, then most of the time the property that you have is not going to go to the spouse where you may want it to go. Most of the time it's going to end up going to those kids, and or just depending on what type of property it is, maybe the spouse only gets a life estate interest, for example, in the homestead property. But 99% of the time, the property doesn't go where people want it to go.
Yeah. And I mean, my theory is you don't want the government as your, like, getting your stuff. I mean, they take enough as it is. So why not? I think the other misconception that so many people have is one, people are lazy or they don't want to do it, right, because it's morbid. But the thing that I hear all the time, and I try to convince people otherwise, is they're like, I can't afford it. Mm-hmm. It's just so expensive. And I'm like, if you're working with the right person, I mean, and depending, I'm sure, on like how everything is structured, you can do something a lot cheaper than I think most people think. I mean, most people I talk to, like, I can't pay an attorney $5,000 to do this. And I'm like, it shouldn't cost you $5,000.
No, I mean, completely agree. I mean, it's sitting down with individuals and it's really getting somebody to listen to who they are, what they've got for assets, what their family situation is, and what they're trying to achieve. Now, yes, there are some people that have massive net worth and they do need that tax-based planning that is going to be expensive. No doubt about it. But if you've done that well in your life, you can afford that. So you're okay. Right. But for the average person, a lot of it can be done with just real basic documents and somebody actually explaining to them how to go out there and take care of those financial accounts that they have by updating beneficiary designations so that the items flow where they want it to be. And, a lot of times we can do things for people for a couple $100. It, really just depends on what it is they're looking for. But so much of the time it's getting somebody that just actually listens to what they're trying to accomplish versus, a lot of places, hey, we've got to get, $1,500, $2,000, $3,000 on every one of these people that walks through the door so we can keep the lights on. And that's not really the way to do an estate plan for somebody. It's what's the cheapest, simplest, easiest method that we can come up with for them that actually achieves the goal that they want. And for some people, it's knowledge and education. So a lot of times we may explain to somebody, hey, here's the benefit of a revocable trust, but it may not be in their financial means at the time to want to take it to that level. And we go, okay, here's the alternatives to it, and here's the pluses and negatives of not having it. And once you've got that education, you can make a decision and find what's best for you.
Yeah. So I people ask me this, and I try to, explain it the best I can, but I'm like, I'm not an attorney, so I try to, defer to you. Like most people, I feel like they don't even know what are the main differences between a will versus the trust. What makes sense for one, when are both necessary, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I typically explain it to people like this, right? Everyone knows what a will is. It's a piece of paper that says, when I die, this is where I want my property to go. The biggest problem with a will is going to be attorneys, and the fact that in order for a will to actually be effective and for the items to pass where you want it to, you actually have to go to court and you have to actually probate that will. As attorneys, we've created job security with the legislation, and you are required to have an attorney in most circumstances to help you probate that will. So the revocable trust, in simple terms, is that quote unquote next level of estate planning. And what it is it's a legal fiction while you're alive that allows for us to take your assets and either put them in the trust or direct them at the trust when you die, simply so that you can avoid probate. So when the items are in the trust, that trustee takes over after you die, and at that point in time, they'll be able to administer those assets however you want. One of the big benefits or bonuses we get to the trust is going to be if you've got children who are under the age of 18, they're not capable or legally able to manage their finances or make decisions with them. So that trust allows us a vehicle that you can pick that trustee who can help manage those assets for the kids until such a time as you feel like they may be capable of managing them on their own.
Yeah. I just think that's so important. I have had so many people the last 2 to 3 years call me and say, hey, Melissa, my mom passed. I need you to sell her house. And, the last couple of years, the market has been insane. things selling almost immediately and for crazy over. But they're like, hey, can you get my house on the market this week? I'm like, no, you have to go through probate. And in some cases, good Lord, it was taking forever based by county. I mean, I felt like Tarrant County took forever.
COVID. So the probate system, it used to not be that bad. I mean, it used to be you could file the application. It was what they call posted for 10 days. And most of the time I could tell clients, hey, we can get in front of a judge within 3 to 4 weeks and get this probate pretty much handled. With COVID and with the judges not being in the courthouses, it was taking 3, 4, 5, 6 months, even a year in some counties just to get things done. So, it was really, really delaying the process and made it pretty painful for most people.
So for people who don't know, when exactly like what I was explaining, can you just talk a little bit more in depth about what really happens during the probate process? Like what's normal? So like somebody, their family member dies, they need to sell the house, but they can't until, X, Y, and Z are done. Just kind of to summarize what that is like.
Yeah, so typically what it is, the first steps are always grieve and start to compile information is what we tell family. At that point in time, if they actually have a will, then what we do is we file an application with the court to get somebody appointed as the executor. Once it's been filed with the court, again, they post it for 10 days. And then at that point in time, we can then schedule a hearing. If we've got a will, if it has been properly executed with the formalities required in Texas, then most of the time it's about 21 questions in front of the judge. And at that point in time, the judge will actually appoint somebody as the executor. And then you'll get pieces of paper, letters testamentary, they call them, that will actually give that executor the authority to go out there and do things on behalf of the estate. If there is no will involved, it adds an additional step in there with what they call an heirship proceeding. And that is basically where the court is going to make a determination on who the heirs are of the estate. And in order for that determination to be made, the court will actually appoint an additional attorney that will represent those unknown heirs. And then that attorney will actually go out there and try to do research, talk to people to make a determination who the heirs are. And based on what they can come back with for information, submit a report to the judge. And at that point in time, we'll have an additional hearing to get a court ruling on who the heirs are. What gets most people most of the time is that whoever is probating that estate is actually paying for that additional attorney. So they've got to pay all their fees and expenses. And just depending on the family history, where they are, so on and so forth, that can get pretty pricey and expensive depending on the work they got to put in.
So what I'm hearing is people just get both. Get the will and the trust, because then you'll be able to avoid a lot of this process, right? If your mother or father or whoever dies and you have their home that you have to deal with, like you're not going to have to jump through all the legal hoops, to do what you need to do, essentially.
To a degree, because the revocable trust does effectively allow for the transferring of the property, and it's great for a lot of people, but it kind of goes back to that thing of, the cost and listening to the clients and what they need. And if they don't have a lot of other assets that do not easily transfer via beneficiary designation, or if all of their kids are over 18 and capable of managing funds, we can then still do a simple will, but we can now do what they call a transfer on death deed in the state of Texas, which is basically an additional document that gets filed. And that additional document just tells the court, or just says, when you die, this is where we want the property to go to. A lot of other states out there have what they call joint tenants with rights of survivorship, where you basically just list it on the deed when you buy it. Texas doesn't have that, but this transfer on death deed will allow us, in essence, that same thing of conveying the property and avoiding probate.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is just something like, again, I've said this on a previous podcast, but I personally think, like, if you have anybody in your life that you actually say you love or you care about, just do this, right? Because, I mean, people always say, well, what do I need that for? I'm going to be dead. Well, I mean, good Lord, I wouldn't want my daughter to have to just fight for what should already be hers. Like, when you lose somebody, like a mom or a dad or whatever, it's hard enough as it is. And then if you have to fight that battle, to me, it's an unnecessary step if you just go through the process. And let me tell you, I mean, I've gone through the process with you. I have the will and the trust, and God, you made it so easy. I mean, you literally asked us for certain things, we gave them to you, and then it was just, you knocked it out of the park. And it just, the burden that I felt like it took off of me, just knowing that if I drop dead tomorrow, my stuff, people are going to be okay. It's handled.
And that's it. Everyone thinks it's got to be super expensive, and everyone thinks it's got to be really complicated. And it just doesn't have to be, because 99% of the people out there, they don't live that super complicated life. And we can make it easy. And once you understand it and it's explained to you, at that point in time, you get it, and it really simplifies the system.
Yeah. Now, I know we've talked a lot about more getting your affairs in order, but I know with your practice, you do more than just estate planning.
Yeah.
So, like, kind of as far as your practice, what is more? Do you have a more focus on one area that you do more things, or?
We do real estate and corporate law as well, which actually really comes into play nicely when we get to the estate planning, because I call it the 30,000 foot view for people, because I can look at the real estate that you have, the companies that you have, and your estate planning, and we can explain to you how we tie everything all in together. From the get-go, again, sometimes it may be cost prohibitive for people, but it's an educational process for them so that they understand as they go out there and they acquire that rental property. Well, here's why we may or may not want to put it into a limited liability company to add asset protection. Maybe a series LLC is what we want to go with. When we start looking at ways to then tie it into the trust and things like that. But if the clients have the education and knowledge out there, as they go forward, as they get to these next hurdles in their life, as things change, they stop, a light bulb goes off, they pick up the phone and they call and they ask more questions, and they're not just doing things that turn around and end up costing them a lot more money in the long run to do correctly, because they've been educated along the way.
Yeah. All right, so let me ask you a couple of just like random kind of off the wall questions that I just was thinking about this, and I'm like, if I do this with anybody, I want it to be you, because I can only imagine your response. Like, one is like, if you could go back and talk to your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give yourself?
Honestly, at this point in time, I'm honestly kind of happy with the way I've done things. It's just, I enjoy treating people correctly, undercharging and over-delivering. It's always been my motto. So yes, I never woke up saying, hey, I'm going to be an attorney, but as I got into it and did it, I love doing it. I enjoy doing it. For me, it's about the long-term clients and those long-term relationships, and helping people do small things along the way. That's where I get the joy. I've had many clients now for 10, 15 years, and it's fun watching their families grow as I've protected them through the years, and as their needs change.
Yeah.
And then you start doing estate planning for their kids and their grandkids and stuff, and
that's a great response. And I don't know what I was expecting you to say, but I mean, that's exactly how I feel about my business, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I've so many people, like, you're in the business to help people, right? And I've done different things in my career, as you have, and I mean, I never thought when I entered into real estate that it would be the most rewarding profession I had ever been in. But now that I've been doing it and like helping people do the hard stuff and, trusting me with their finances to help them make the biggest purchase that they're going to make, and then referring me to their kids and their grandkids and their sister and all the stuff, like, that's what makes it come full circle. And like I'm doing hosting I do these client parties pretty frequently, and I'm doing one next month. I decided to just rent out a movie theater, and I'm like, I want everybody to just bring their kids, bring your grandkids, bring friends. I don't care. I want the theater full, right? Everybody just have a good time. And I've gotten more responses back from people being like, oh, I'm so mad I'm not going to be able to come. We're doing summer whatever, but they just look forward to just that engagement with people. Yeah. Even when it's just, and it's not like I'm talking to them about real estate. It's just genuine, like, catching up with people, like, because I care. And I think that shows tenfold in your business, that you're just like, I am not a transactional person in my business, and neither are you. right? Like, sure, you need to make money, but it's about treating people right, doing the right thing, and then it just spirals, right? I think, like my business coach always has said, like, you give it out in slices and it comes back in loaves, right? And the longer you are consistent with doing all the right things, 100%, I believe that's how it works.
Yeah, and I think early on in my career, it was, I'd met an attorney and he had made the comment to me that he never told people that he's an attorney when he goes out places. And at first I was like, oh, I get it. You just don't want to be bombarded with questions all the time, this and that. And then years later, it dawned on me, the reason he didn't tell people that he was an attorney when he went out was because he wasn't happy with what he was doing. He didn't enjoy it. He didn't actually want to help people. And you're always out and you meet friends and everyone's always got a question, right?
Yeah.
And they're afraid to ask it. Well, ask the question. You know what I mean? It's so,
yeah.
But I enjoy what I do and I tell people I'm an attorney, so.
And I get that. Like I've had several physician friends, and if we're out and about, like I never ask them squat, right? But people will be like, oh, hey, Dr. So-and-so. And we'll just be like at dinner. Like I was at dinner with this buddy of mine one time, and this girl who he knows comes over and sees him, and it was like, hey, raises up her shirt, like what's this? And I'm like, oh my God, this poor guy. He can't even go to dinner without running into like a patient. And it's so I get why some people say in certain scenarios, like I'm not, because everybody just wants free advice or whatever, but it can be entertaining. But all right, so last question. What makes you feel inspired or motivated?
Honestly, I like working with the small business clients. I like watching people grow. It's rewarding to see somebody that I helped in the beginning that 5-10 years later, they're still in business and that they're doing really well. And I'm a car guy, and it just so happens that, I end up getting most clients that end up being car guys. And what I enjoy is they'll show up with that car or something that they always wanted. That's the thing that always really gets me.
That's cool. Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
I'm so grateful for your time.
If you have questions about buying, selling, renting, or investing, don't go at it alone. Reach out to Melissa at 214-280-4317 or Melissa at melissamovesdfw.com. You can find out more about the Melissa Avera Realty Group at TVG by visiting melissamovesdfw.com. Thank you for listening to Going the Extra Mile.